first, Bobby, thanks. It's good to see you, and great to be with everybody. It's an amazing, I think, not just a event, but really a movement that you put together, and it's been a critical part of our success in Washington. So thank you for having me here for just a little bit. When Bobby invited me to speak, I, of course, said that I was honored to come and happy to do it, but only if we did an interview as opposed to a speech. Because with a speech, you have to think about what you're going to say, where, you know, an interview, I just have to answer your questions. I don't have to think at all to do an interview. That's great. So one of the, just to answer that question, so obviously if you go back to like the MFN stuff, meaning most favored nation drug pricing, that really has happened because the president and Bobby and a number of members of the team have been actually working with private industry to lower the cost of prescription drugs for American citizens. Now, it would be great if we could get congressional Democrats to actually do something meaningful with us, because you would think, you know, you think of Democrats, they like to say that they're for the working people against the big pharma companies, so you would think that legislatively they would want to work with us, but it's actually been hard to get them to work with us, so we've had to sort of go outside of the system and work with private industry to do some of this stuff, and I think you guys have done an incredible job with that. But if you look at a lot of our most important health initiatives, they've come through partnership with private industry in some form or another. And I also think that there's a mindset shift where, you mentioned some of the people like Marty, like Jay, who have been such a critical part of what you've been doing. The thing that I love about the team that Bobby has put together is, yes, a lot of them have a sort of private sector mindset. They just want to get things done. They don't care about the bureaucracy or sort of, they don't care about all the people saying no in government, because as Bobby and I have learned, there are a lot of people saying, no, you're not allowed to do that, or no, you shouldn't do that. And we just have to punch through that in order to achieve results for the American people. But I also just love that Bobby has put together a team of people who are not terrified to think about things in new and interesting ways. And if you think about what has been so broken about the public health bureaucracy in this country for years, for decades, generations even, it's that people think in incredibly conventional ways. And if you bring them a non-conventional idea, their automatic assumption is, no, we're not allowed to talk about that, much less fund something related to that. And I think it's maybe the most important thing of all the specific initiatives that you guys have worked on effectively. The most important thing is that your team is willing to ask questions that people in government haven't been asking in a long time. And if you think about how unhealthy the American population has gotten over the past 20 or 30 years, you're not going to fix that problem unless you have people at the table who are asking different questions. That's exactly right. That is a good summary of Donald J. Trump, is that he takes a bulldozer to Overton windows every single day. But it had to happen. It just had to happen. And if you look at so many of the things that are happening on the public health side, I mean, one of the criticisms that Bobby will always get, and I always think it's such bullshit, excuse my language, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. It's probably covering, I apologize to everybody who's watching live on Fox News, but hopefully they were able to bleep that out. But anyway, is sometimes there's this attack where people say, well, this or that conclusion is not supported by the science, or this or that conclusion is a conspiracy theory. And science, as practiced in its best form, is that if you disagree with it, then you ought to criticize it, and you ought to argue it against it, but you can't shut down the debate. And that really is, if you look at all of the big public health debates that we've had in this country over the last 20 or 30 years, it doesn't bother me that they disagreed with something that I believed or disagreed with something you believed or any of you. It's that they tried to silence the people who were—
That kind of change.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, to put a slightly different spin on it, a lot of the times the people who are discovering things interesting and new are a little weird, right? I mean, American society for a very long time had a willingness to accept unconventional, slightly odd people inside some of these industries, inside some of these bureaucracies. I mean, I've been reading a lot in the past couple of weeks about von Neumann, the Hungarian scientist who came to the United States and was very important in the Manhattan Project. And what I keep on finding myself thinking, I mean, this is a brilliant guy. This is, one of the, I think it was Edward Teller or Oppenheimer or another, the Manhattan Institute people said about von Neumann that von Neumann was talking to his 3-year-old, And then he realized that he used the same skill von Neumann did when talking to a 3-year-old as he did with everybody else, because he was so far above everybody else in terms of brilliance. But then you read about this guy, and I think to myself, half of the shit that this guy said would have gotten him canceled, or would have gotten his career ruined, or would have had his life ruined. There is no way that this country is going to advance unless we're comfortable with people who are willing to challenge orthodoxy. And that's what I think got so broken, not just about the scientific bureaucracy, but probably it was worse in the scientific area than in most other places, is we've got to be comfortable challenging some of these old orthodoxies. And part of that is welcoming people who are a little unusual, because unless you do that, like, you're not going to solve America's problems with McKinsey consultants who say everything the right way all the time. No offense for the McKinsey consultants, because but many of whom are very brilliant people, but like you need the consultant mindset. You also need the person who is just thinking about an idea. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the public health stuff in particular is very bad. And if you look at where life expectancy has gotten the worst in the United States, Appalachia is sort of at the top of the list. And the way that I realized this, actually, so my dad died of cancer a few years ago. And it was one of these sort of super aggressive cancers, came on very unexpectedly, and then all of a sudden he was gone a few months later. But I was talking with my wife, with Usha, about this, and Usha, she was like, have you ever had like a really important male figure in your life survive to the age of 70? Like, so I'm looking at, and it's like, okay, my grandfather died at 67 from a very preventable illness, but 67 from a very preventable, very treatable illness. I think all of my aunts or all of my uncles, and not a single one of them that I could think of made it to 69. Maybe one of them made it to 70 or 71. And it kind of hit me that if you grow up in Appalachia, you are used to losing the people that you love very, very early on. And you want to talk about like populism, and you want to talk about people being pissed off. Well, yeah, people are pissed off when they don't have good jobs, and people are pissed off when things disappear and move overseas, and people are pissed off when they feel like other countries are being prioritized over the United States of America, and all of that is part of the populist resentment of the past 20 or 30 years in American politics. You know what really pisses people off? When they realize that their loved ones are dying much sooner than everybody else. And that is a big part of the story of what's going on in Appalachia, and why I think so many people in Appalachia feel left behind. I mean, my story, obviously, it's been, like you said, I'm like the golden boy. Things have just worked out for me in this really incredible way. I feel so lucky and so grateful for it. But I also feel a certain sense of guilt, because there are a lot of people who grew up in families like mine who haven't had an easy life, and who haven't had all this economic opportunity, and who haven't had a person that they've fallen in love with, and they've been able to sort of build a stable, nice family like me and Usha have been able to build. And that gives me a sense of purpose, because I want those people to have the same opportunities that I've had. But it also gives me a great sense of anger, because we never should have gotten to the point that we are today. And the reason that we have is because of failed leadership, and it's failed leadership over generations. And by the way, you talk about Appalachia, you were talking about people who, though they don't have much, would take the shirt off their back and give it to a complete stranger, because that's what you do. If you go back to America's biggest wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, which are the counties that filled their draft quotas with volunteers instead of with draftees? It's very often the parts in deep Appalachia where you've got grinding poverty, but you've also got this incredible love of country. So if any place in this country deserves not to be left behind, it's Appalachia. But on the public health stuff in particular, the numbers don't look good. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a big supporter of what you're doing, because these are people who deserve to live better, healthier lives, but they really have been left behind by this country.